So what do we need to know to determine if a property is a short sale? We need to know what needs to be paid in order to clear the title and convey a clear title to the buyer. So what does that mean? We need to know what debts are on the property. We need to know what's attached as liens. So we're looking for what mortgages are on the property. Are there any judgment liens on the property? Are there any water, sewer, trash, or other types of municipal liens, mechanics liens, any of those types of things on title that need to be cleared? We also need to know who's on title. It's not uncommon for you to see a divorce situation where there were two parties on title, now there's only one, or maybe there's two parties on title, but only one party is on the mortgage, and vice versa. A trip to the recorder's office is usually needed in order to gather this information. Other information we need to figure out is what are the costs of the sale to the homeowner. Normally, when you sell property, you have things to pay like real estate agent commission, conveyance taxes to the town, to the state, to the county, depending on where you live, closing attorney or title company charges, recording charges to record the releases of the mortgage or mortgages or other liens, unpaid taxes. Commonly, if the homeowner hasn't been paying the mortgage, that means they haven't been paying money into escrow, or if their taxes were not escrowed, they probably were not paying the taxes also. And in the case of when they are escrowed with the lender, if they haven't been paying the mortgage and there's no money in their escrow account, it's kind of up in the air as to whether or not the bank's going to end up paying the taxes. Some banks will, some will not, some will pay them late. So when you're coming into a period where the taxes are going to be coming due, you have to assume the bank's not going to have them paid when you go to closing and that they'll need to be paid prorated through the date of closing. So that's a figure that we have to figure out. Unpaid municipal charges, like I said earlier, such as water, sewer, trash, municipal liens, potentially for violations, that type of thing. So we need to go to the recorder's office, which is where? Here in Connecticut, it would be the town hall. So each town records their land records in the town that the property's in. Other parts of the country, such as Massachusetts and most of the rest of the country, those documents are recorded at the county recorder's office. So they're done at the county level. And what is it that we need to get from there? Well, normally as a real estate agent, you want to get a copy of the deed to make sure that every person who's on title is on your listing agreement. But obviously for us, we're going to need to know that as well. And those are the parties that are going to need to be a party to the contract when the property goes to sale. And we're checking to see if the same people that are on title are the same people that are on the mortgage. Oftentimes, you'll find that that's not the case. You may have an in-law that bought into the property after the fact and they're not on the mortgage, or maybe the mortgage was only in the husband's name or only in the wife's name and the other one is not on the mortgage, but they're both on title. Or maybe they're both on the mortgage, but there's been a divorce and one of them is no longer on title. So we need to get a copy of the deed, and we're going to end up getting copies of the mortgages also. So you want to check also to see if there's any unreleased mortgages. It's also not uncommon if somebody refinances and they're just going into the bank to do it, or maybe it's they go in front of the notary to sign paperwork because the bank just mailed them the stuff. Oftentimes what will happen, because it's not a sale of the property, the release of the mortgage that they paid off by refinancing, that release will be sent to them and they have to bring it and have it recorded. And they usually don't know that. So it's not uncommon for that release to not be recorded on the land records even though they paid off the loan. So then you have to track that down. In the situation of a short sale, you want to know what's unreleased so you can make sure that if there's something that's unreleased and it's unreleased because it hasn't been paid, that we're negotiating it. Same thing when it comes to judgment liens. Typically in, well, at least here in Connecticut, and I believe it's the same in many states, if you're sued by a creditor for any kind of debt and they win a judgment against you for having not paid that debt and you own property, they can have the court issue a judgment lien, and that gets recorded on the land records. So that's something else we have to be aware of, because we have to try and figure out how to get that released, because it doesn't matter if the mortgage company agrees to take less money than they're owed. If you got a judgment lien in the way, you can't convey clear title to the buyer, so you still can't close. And then there's other issues potentially that we want to try and determine early on, if possible, that may be a problem with title. You know, an unrecorded quitclaim deed. I actually have one like that right now, where the parties thought that the ex-husband was no longer on title, but there's no recorded quitclaim deed. When they did the refinance, and it was supposed to be taken care of then. They swear that it was signed, but looks like the party that actually took care of the paperwork for the refinance didn't get it recorded. So there's things like that, that we want to look at also. Luckily, a lot of this stuff's available online now. At a minimum level, an index oftentimes is available online. So you can see the names of the parties to a document that's been recorded, the book and page that it's been recorded in, and then the type of document it is. So you can see if there's a mortgage and it says Wells Fargo and Jane Smith, and it shows a book and page number, and then later on there's a release issued, and that's recorded, and it says it's Wells Fargo and Jane Smith, and the book and page that it references it's releasing is that mortgage that you saw, then you know that those two wipe each other out, and they're no longer an issue. So you can kind of do a down and dirty title search online if the index is available online. And then if there's questions that you still have, then you can go to the recorder's office if you can't print them out online, because sometimes you can do that too. Of course, they charge you for it. But if you can't, then you can go to the recorder's office and get copies of it. When you go in, you already know what you're looking for because the index was online. If it's not, then you have to actually go in and look at the index and then figure out what you need, moving forward from there. So the other thing we have to check on is foreclosure. Is the property already in foreclosure if that person has not been paying their mortgage? Here in Connecticut, that's easy. We go to the jud.ct.gov website. It's the judicial court website. And we can look up foreclosure filings, but you can't look it up by the property address. You have to have the person who's being foreclosed on's name. So basically, as long as you have the legal name for anyone who's on title, they'll be listed in the foreclosure even if they're not on the mortgage because they have to be notified. So you can look up by their name. So really quickly, here's a snapshot of the judicial court website here in Connecticut. You want to go to the case lookup, and then it'll drop down, and civil and family is where foreclosures are. It's also where divorces go. And then you'll see below there small claims. We often can find judgments there also. So when we see somebody who's very behind and they fill out an income and expense sheet for us and they're behind on a lot of things, especially credit cards, we'll look up their name in small claims to see if there's any lawsuits going on from those other debts they haven't been paying. And if there's judgments that have already been awarded against them and they're not satisfied, very good chance that those are judgment liens also now. So something to look at in the land records. Also something, if you see it's actively going on, chance that there may be a judgment lien that's going to pop up on you between now and when you get to closing. So those are good to know. But civil and family is where we look up foreclosures. When you click on civil and family, it brings up this page, and you can see there you can look up by docket number, which you probably wouldn't have unless they had the foreclosure paperwork in front of them already. But party name you can look up by. So when you click on party name, you can put in the last name, first name, and then click on search. So you do that, it'll bring up a list of anything in those people's names. Obviously, if it's a John Smith, there's going to be a lot of them. It'll show by county, and then you may have to click on a few. If the homeowner has filed an appearance form with the court, which is one of the first documents they should send back once the foreclosure starts, and they're representing themselves, then their name and their address will be listed. If they have an attorney that's hired for them, they'll be the person who's appearing for them. So it would list the attorney's information, so you wouldn't be able to verify that that was for that same property. But if you see, Wells Fargo versus Jane Smith, and Jane Smith is your homeowner, and they're in Hartford, Connecticut, and it shows Hartford Judicial Court, pretty good chance that one's probably for the person that you're working with. But this is where, we go to look that information up. Obviously, there's information we're going to need to get from the homeowners also. We're going to get further into this later, but initially we're going to want to see copies of the mortgage statements so we can have the contact information for the mortgage company to know the principal balance. We'll be able to tell from that whether they've been paying the mortgage or not, how much is owed, how much is behind. Also give you an idea of how close maybe they are to foreclosure being filed, that type of thing. Hardship letter, which explains what their hardship reason is, because that is very important to the lender. An income and expense sheet, so you can determine if it looks like they're going to qualify for a short sale, because just because they want to do a short sale, just because they haven't been paying their mortgage, and just because the property is not worth what they owe, doesn't mean they qualify for a short sale. If some of those things are voluntary, as far as not paying the mortgage, even though they could afford it, they may not qualify. So affordability is an issue. And then obviously we'll need an authorization to release information that we would send to all the lien holders on title, the mortgage companies, judgment liens, whoever it is that we're going to need to be in contact with, get payoff figures from, negotiate with, that type of thing. We need authorization forms for all those parties. So next time we're going to talk about qualifying the homeowner with that information that we just gathered and then determining the guidelines by speaking with the lender.